Hey Acers, welcome to this week's Ace Role-Playing Games longer format version, and I'm hoping that my little shorts are helping me to get better at expressing myself and be able to give you something that's usable. We're going to continue with the Simply GM series on Savage Worlds, and we're going to talk about hunger. Now, of course, hunger, when you think about it, you think about the mouse in the cartoon whose stomach is sucked all the way in and it goes because he's hungry, and it growls because he's hungry. And some people think that when their stomachs growl that they're hungry. Not necessarily so, but that's neither here nor there. What we're talking about is hunger for an average human. They need about 1,500 calories of food a day, of reasonably nutritious food. And there's a whole thing about why when you eat one Dorito, you eat the whole bag because of the way it tricks with your mind and everything like that. But the point is, 24 hours without enough food, the victim has to make a vigor roll. And if they've only had half rations, they have to subtract 1 from it. And -2 if they've had no food at all. Failure means that they gain a level of fatigue. And the survival skill on page 35 of the book tells what they need to do when they scavenge for food. Now, if you get a second failure, or you critically fail, that is going to be incapacitation. Remember that with wounds, it takes 3 wounds, and then the 4th wound is incapacitation. With fatigue, though, it takes only 2 fatigue points, and then the 3rd one is incapacitation. So if you're playing your villains right, they should be attacking the characters with fatigue. Put them in a room full of smoke, and they're going to have to breathe that smoke, and that's going to cause them to fatigue a lot faster, and they'll pass out for it. Or starve them. Give them a few days wandering through a desert without rations, and they'll find it. And without survival. So an incapacitated character dies from hunger 3d6 hours after they become incapacitated. Now, if they recover, the victim has at least a half day's worth of food, in that they can recover from that. They can recover from that hunger. Now, being as hunger only covered just a couple minutes here, let's talk about poison. And if you're doing a role-playing game, you have assassins who have poison, snakes have poison, spiders have poison, plants have poison, all sorts of things have poisons, something that's toxic to their characters. And if they're playing a character that's not a normal character, then if they're playing a plant-based blue-skinned life form, then maybe there's a red plant that's common on many different worlds that actually acts as a toxin to those people. That's what we're after. So when something with a poison on it causes a shaken result, at least on an attack, that means that it's actually contacted the character. Then they need to make an immediate vigor roll. This is a free roll, minus the strength of the poison, if it's listed. Failure means that the character is distracted, in addition to any of these following special effects. The poison could be a knockout poison, which incapacitates and knocks the character out, makes them unconscious for 2d6 hours, twice that with a critical failure. It could be a lethal poison. The victim is stunned and takes a wound, 2 if it's a critical failure, and they perish in 2d6 rounds. So that means that everything locks up and they fall over. And if they don't get an antidote in 2d6 rounds, they die. Mild poison. The victim suffers fatigue or exhaustion, and with a critical failure, or fatigue, that's 1 level of fatigue. Exhaustion, 2 levels of fatigue if it's a critical failure. So this cannot cause incapacitation. So it's like in Dune, there's a poison on the blade that Feyd-Rautha uses when he fights the slave in the arena. The poison makes it so the muscles respond more slowly on the slave. And it causes them to seize up. And so that would be an example of a mild poison, but it would put their opponent at a fatigue or even exhaustion, giving them a -1 or -2 to all their rolls. So that's a pretty potent thing to do still. Now, paralyzing poison, you treat it. You treat the victim as stunned, and if the duration is listed, the victim cannot attempt to recover from being stunned until that amount has passed. Otherwise, they can attempt to recover the paralysis on their next turn, as usual. So these are simplified poison rules, and as a game master, we adjust these to fit the specific circumstances. So maybe it is a blue ring octopus that somebody had put on their chest inside of a upside down tank or something, and that is a lethal poison. Maybe it's a cobra poison that will cause, maybe there's a poison that causes blindness for a temporary amount of time. Whatever it is, make sure that that poison is accounted for. Now, characters can make healing rolls minus the strength of the poison, if any modifier is listed, to stop the effects of the act and to stop the effects of the poison. If they succeed, the victim's life is saved and the poison no longer has any ill effects. So that's the antidotes and stuff like that. Paralyzed victims can move, those rendered unconscious wake up, and each character can only attempt one healing roll per incident to cure the poison. But another character with healing can make the same attempt. And you could get everybody in the party. Or they can do support rolls as well. Because remember, even if you don't have an antidote or something, or even if you have someone who's only got a D4 in healing, they don't necessarily have to try their hand at healing them. As a matter of fact, it could all be a group effort and everybody can take a turn. And so maybe even that person with the D4 could still roll healing and make a good roll. So another type of poisoning to think about is from radiation. So characters in a radioactive environment need to make a vigor roll every hour spent in low radiation and every minute spent in high radiation. Each failure results in a fatigue level. And an incapacitated victim contracts radiation sickness, which is a chronic disease. And we handle it like a disease from up above. Talking further, let's talk about sleep. Most people need a minimum of 6 hours of sleep out of every 24. And usually because of the way that sleep goes in 90-minute cycles through REM sleep and dreams and everything like that, and deep sleep and back up, you actually getting 8 to 9 hours is good for your body. And as a teenager, if you're a teenager watching this, you might even want to go more. But what we're going to be doing here is we're going to roll a vigor roll at a cumulative -2 for every 24 hours after. Okay, so character who goes without sleep must make a vigor roll at a cumulative -2 for every 24 hours thereafter to a maximum penalty of -4 or suffer fatigue, and a large amount of coffee, soda, or other stimulants add +2 to that roll. So your character could be, unfortunately, we all live in this world where we're just kind of like, oh, I'm so tired here. And we grab a cup of coffee and we start chugging. I don't drink coffee. And there's other reasons for that, but I will drink a drink called yerba mate. And it's a drink from South America, and it's got a bit of caffeine in it. And that caffeine can wake me up when I'm groggy and tired after I've only gotten just barely 6 hours of sleep. And I don't get solid sleep. So this is an example of where having a CPAP, for example, like I do, because genetically I got blessed with a very tight air passageway. And that's the reason why my son had his surgery, is because he was getting his cut down, whereas I can't get mine cut down. It's too late in my life. So I'm on a machine that I put on my nose every night, and it dries me out. I get so dry inside my mouth. And so this is an example of why a character might not be getting sleep. So even in a 6-hour period when I'm kind of asleep most of it, I have a hard time staying asleep because my mouth will dry out. I think I've mentioned it before, where my teeth stick to my lips stick to my teeth, my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. And actually, this is a great segue into thirst, because that wakes me up in the middle of the night, and I have to take a drink of water in order to get myself back to sleep. So let's talk about thirst. Average human requires 2 quarts of water a day. And that requirement is doubled in very dry conditions like deserts. And here in Utah, it's a high desert, so yeah, we need a lot of water. Areas of high heat and humidity like jungle are also other places. You wouldn't think that a rainforest, sweaty, drippy jungle would be a place where you'd need so much more water, but you do, because of the way that it's in the air and everything. And you're always sweating, and you begin to dehydrate. And if you don't have enough water, your character begins to suffer from dehydration. A day after they can't get enough water, they have to make a vigor roll. And every 8 hours, 4 hours in the hot or humid environment, and subtract 2, less than half the water that they need that period. If they've had less than half the water. And -4 if they've had no water at all. Failure incurs a level of fatigue. Critical failure means exhaustion. Again, so the survival skill can help counter that. Characters recover fatigue levels normally after receiving sufficient water. And if they're incapacitated by their thirst, so they went to fatigued, failed again, went to exhausted, failed a third time, went to incapacitated, then they have 2d6 hours to get back to life. So this actually wraps up the hazards. So if you've been bored with these, I apologize, but this is something that will help you not necessarily bring a simulated realism to your gaming, because that's not what we're after. We're after the fun that we bring our players. And if there's a risk that their character could dehydrate or fall victim to poison or something like that, then they're going to be a lot more engaged in the story. And that's what we do all this for. We do all these rules so that we can engage our players in the story. I'm kind of excited because now that we're done with hazards, we're going to move on next week we're going to talk about interludes, which is one of my favorite mechanics of all of Savage Worlds. It is one of my most favorite things, and I look forward to sharing it with you. I hope the little shorts have been fun. Thanks again to all 1,800 people who've watched my video on the villain, even caring about the player characters. Thanks for that. You guys are awesome. Share my channel around if you think this is something that can help somebody understand how to run Savage Worlds better or how to run games better. If my shorts are helping you, please indicate in the comments, and like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff here. And let's continue to grow this community, because if nobody has told you today, I do love you. I really do. I may not have even met you yet, but I love you because you are an amazing human being. The world is such a better place because you are in it. And I hope to see you at my table, and I hope we can game together. Talk to you soon.